If you want to make beats but you have zero musical knowledge, no idea how to start or even what to do, today I'm going to give you a simple to use process that you can use to make beats right away. My name is Navie. I've been making beats for over 15 years. I've produced for artists, gotten millions of streams on my own music, and today I'm going to show you the beat making approach that I use to do all this. And best of all, this approach works even if you don't know any music theory, you're a beginner with zero experience, and this works no matter what genre or style you want to make. So let's begin by talking about how this process works. As you probably know, beats are made up of many different sounds, and you can almost think of these sounds like they are building blocks. So part one of this process is to build these blocks and stack them on top of each other. Meaning we're basically starting our beat by only building vertically. Then we take what we've built and we repeat it. But as we do this, we take away blocks, we add new blocks, and change our current blocks. Basically, this is where we build horizontally. And so with this two-part beat making process, you can make beats even if you have no idea what you're doing. Now I know what you might be thinking, easier said than done. So to make this even easier, I'm going to give you a complete, in-depth, step-by-step breakdown on how to do all of this and show you the important key ideas that you may have been missing if you tried this in the past. And best of all, we can even do this together. I'm going to make a full beat in this video, so if you'd like to build this beat along with me, all you need are 3 things which you can all download for free. Number 1, a demo of FL Studio. I want to say you don't have to use FL Studio to make beats, but for the sake of this video, this is the beat making program that I will use to show you everything. Number 2, my beat starter pack, which you can download for free in the description box below. In this pack, you will find all the sounds that we will use to build this beat, plus many more. And number 3, a positive attitude. Let's turn those beat making tears into squirts of joy. Wait a minute. Anyways, let's begin by starting a new blank project. And then if you've downloaded my free starter beat pack, open up the FL Studio browser by pressing this button up here. And now take the unzipped folder of all of the sounds within this pack and drag it into the browser. From here, you should see this folder with all of these new sounds for you to use in your beats. They're 100% royalty free, so feel free to use them as you wish, my gift to you. So now we have our sounds ready. Next, let's start building our beat by using our channel rack. You can find the channel rack by pressing this button up here, by the way. The channel rack is what we will use for part 1 of our beat making process to build vertically. You can even see if I drag sounds into the channel rack, it gets taller and taller vertically. Now this very first part of the beat making process can be a struggle for you. How should you start? Well, in my experience, it's helpful to start by picking a cool sound for your beat. Now, obviously, there is no right or wrong answer for what's cool and what's not. It's entirely up to you and your personal tastes, but I do feel it's helpful to spend an extra 10 minutes up front finding a sound that you actually like. Many producers often struggle to get their beats to sound interesting because they use traditional, boring stock sounds, and then they wonder why their beats never become unique or engaging. But by starting with something that actually captivates you, you improve the chances that your beat will stay interesting by the very end, that you actually finish it. So avoid starting your beat by using any old random sound. For this beat, I will start by using this sound that I happen to like here. I'll just quickly delete all of these other random sounds that I added in, and then we can drag this as our first sound into our channel rack. And there we go. I have step 1 complete, which is to select a cool sound for your beat. Now, before we start building a musical pattern using this sound, we need to make another important decision first, which is to set the BPM of our beat. Basically, the BPM is how fast or slow you want your beat to be. You can hear if I turn on the metronome and press play, changing the beat's BPM is basically changing the pace of the beat. So your question might be, what should the BPM of your beat be? Well, to me, the real question that you're asking is, what genre or style of beat do you even want to make? Next to me, I've created a rough guideline that you can use for some of the most popular genres and their BPMs. Again, feel free to experiment, but this will at least give you some direction to start with. So for this beat, I will use 80 BPM because I feel like the sound that we chose here would work well in a boom bap beat. And that is step 2 off of this checklist. I have my cool sound selected, and now I have my BPM selected. Now that we have everything ready, we move on to our next step. I will close down my browser since I don't need it for now, and I'll open up my piano roll. And now I will build a pattern using my sound. Like I mentioned before, you might not have any musical knowledge, you might not know any music theory, but the good news is that this doesn't have to hold you back from making beats. I don't know any music theory at all, and I've been able to successfully work with artists and stuff, so don't feel like this is going to stop you from making beats. Instead, just use this approach. Start by just building a pattern that is extremely simple and taking it note by note. And from here, you can make adjustments. Shifting the timing of your notes can be a great idea to test as well. Then you can add more notes if you feel like your pattern is too basic, or stack notes on top of each other to change how they sound, and test out which of these ideas you like for your beat. Now, as you build your first pattern, a mistake that producers make is thinking that they have to build an entire masterpiece right away. So they get stuck on this first step, making something that sounds insanely over the top. But beats are made up of many different sounds and ideas, so the only thing that you need at this point is an idea that makes you think, oh, that sounds pretty cool, and that's it. And since I feel I have that here, I will cross this off my list. I have my, oh, that sounds pretty cool idea built for this beat. So now what is next? Well, when you listen to beats, you'll often notice that there are many different sounds setting in many different spaces. So we need more sounds in this beat. Let's close down this piano roll and go back into our browser and grab this sound here next. Now, a mistake that you want to avoid here is doing the exact same thing using this new sound. Otherwise, your beat will sound overly cluttered and yet incomplete at the same time. To show you what I mean, let's use this new sound here and create a simple pattern. Now what you'll notice is that this new idea didn't really help. Part of the reason why is because it's not really doing anything different from my first sound. But if I take this and I move it to sit in a different space by pitching it down an octave in this example, you can hear it starts to sound more present. It starts to fill up more in this beat. This is because the sound now sits in a different space from my first sound. And this is what I mean by using sounds to fill up different spaces in your beats. Another way that you can do this is by using effects. For example, let's add yet another sound into this beat by grabbing this instrument. Now I want to use this sound to fill up yet another space, but right away you can hear these sounds feel like they sit close to one another. They're all up front in the beat, including this new one. But if I use some effects, I can move this sound into a space that isn't being used right now, into the background. So let's do that with this sound. First, I'll send all 3 of these sounds into our mixer, may as well since we're here. And then for this new sound, I'm going to add a reverb onto it. This is a tool that can help you push your sounds backwards into your beat. And from here, I'll just find a good preset to use so you can hear the difference. Compared to this effect being off, it sounds much more up front, and then when it's on again, it starts to sound like it's in the back. So after using this effect, our sound now feels like it's sitting in a different space compared to our other two sounds. And this is what's helping our beat sound even more full. Now up next is building the actual pattern. One thing that you should try to do with your patterns is avoid building the exact same thing over and over again as you build new patterns. This is yet another beginner mistake that I see, where producers will find good sounds that may be the right sounds for your beat, but the patterns that they build are nearly identical to what they've already built. Here again, you're not doing anything wrong, but you're not really helping fix the big problem in your beat right now, which is getting your beat to sound more full. So to fill up more space and get this beat to sound more full, I'm gonna think about what my other patterns are doing and just build something different from them. For instance, with this first pattern that I've built, you can see that we have more notes playing at certain parts of my loop, while the other remaining areas are far more open. So with my new pattern here that I'm going to build, maybe it would be a good idea to place notes during those more open parts where less is happening in my beat. Alright, so with these three patterns, I feel like we have a good amount of instruments in our beat. Next, let's talk about the other type of block that you will need for your beats, which are your drums. Most of the time, your drums in your beats are going to be made up of three different sounds. You will need a hi-hat, you'll need a kick, and you'll need a snare or a clap. Now, there are other kinds of sounds that you can use or add, but for the sake of keeping this simple, these are the three core drum components that we will use. So first off, let's add our hi-hat pattern from this free pack. We'll bring this into our channel rack. And for the hi-hat pattern, the most common basic approach you can take is to fill in every other square, like so. But when it comes to your hi-hats, feel free to experiment and try different rhythms, but this is a standard pattern that you can use to start. Next, let's talk about snares. We'll grab this snare here. And for snares, the most common approach here is to add your snares on the second and fourth beat, which are the thicker lines in this piano roll. So the first line is technically at the very beginning, then the second one, then the third one, and this is the fourth one. So again, the standard snare pattern is to place them on the second and fourth beat. Now, once again, you can feel free to add more and change things around. For example, if I add some snares here, this sounds okay, but in my opinion, getting too experimental with your drums, especially your snares, is an easy way to undermine your beat. For example, these new snares that I just added can be experimented with much easier. And your beat can still come out sounding okay. But those foundational snares on the 2 and the 4, if you start getting fancy with those, you can hear you lose that important constant pacing in your beat that you bob your head to. So again, just my advice here, be open and experimental with your instrument patterns. That's perfectly fine and great. But when it comes to your drums, especially those foundational core snare notes, my advice is that you might want to be a little bit more conservative, at least when you first start making beats. So let's just go back to our standard snare pattern here. Next up, let's add in our kick. And for kicks, the foundational pattern you usually want to include is to place a kick on the first beat, which is again right here. Then from here, feel free to add in more notes to fill up more spaces in your beats. Kicks are usually more forgiving if you want to get experimental compared to snares. Now, one issue that might make your drum patterns sound worse is that they sound too robotic and too on time. There are situations where you want your drums to feel more human. If that's what you want in your beats, try playing around with the swing dial. This helps it go from sounding robotic and stiff to more human. As a side note, this feature is more commonly used in boom bap beats like this, less so in trap or drill. Anyways, there's one last key block missing in our beat, which is the bass. So let's go ahead and grab a bass sound here. And for your bass pattern, one way that you can build this is by just taking the lowest notes from your musical patterns and try using those as a start. So for example, in this pattern here, it would be these notes at the bottom. So if we copy and paste them over to our bass pattern, let's take a listen to hear how this sounds. This sounds okay, but I think this could sound better in a couple different ways. For one, I'm going to turn on cut itself. The reason why you could hear is because some of these bass notes were overlapping, causing them to sound weird. Cut itself is a feature that will basically make every new note cut off whatever was playing before. Very useful for bass lines. And for the actual pattern, I'm going to shift notes around and change notes just so this pattern is different from what I've already built. Again, I'm applying the same pattern building ideas that I mentioned before. And there we go. At this point, we've successfully filled many of the remaining empty spaces in our beat using all these new sounds. Our beat now sounds much more complete, so let's cross this off our list. We are almost done the vertical building phase of our beat. There is one key step left, and that is leveling. You might find that certain sounds in your beats are too quiet while others are too loud. Some sounds might be clashing with one another and they sound unclear, and your beat might sound unbalanced. These small problems can easily make your beats sound worse, and many of these issues can be fixed with leveling. So let's do this by sending all of the remaining new sounds into our mixer. And then from here, we just adjust the levels or volumes of each sound until we get a better balance. Pro tip that you can use is to listen to a beat that's similar to yours that you're making, and then listen to how loud each sound or block is in that beat, and then just adjust yours to be similar. And that is vertical building complete. As a summary, here is an approach that you can take for the vertical part of your beat making process. Number 1, pick a unique sound. Number 2, pick a BPM. Number 3, start with an "oh, that sounds cool" idea. Number 4, fill up the remaining spaces. Number 5, level your sounds. In my experience, this is probably the hardest part of the beat making process for beginners, so it's okay if this takes you a bit more time to learn. Next, we move on to the horizontal building phase, where we turn this loop into a full beat. So right now, if we go into the FL Studio playlist, which is the tool that we will use to build horizontally, all we have is this one single pattern with all of our sounds in it. But again, we want to use these sounds like they were blocks that we can play around with. So to do that, to turn this into a bunch of different blocks, simply go into Patterns, Split by Channel. And there we go. We now have every single sound and pattern split into individual blocks, so we can build horizontally now. That is step 1 finished already to create your blocks. Now, like I mentioned, if we play the exact same idea over and over again, you would agree that this would probably get repetitive and boring fast. You want some kind of change to occur to your loop. You want to create different sections in your beats where different things are happening. Well, typically there are a few different kinds of sections that are used for beat making, and they can be categorized as the following. You have the verse section, which is where most of the rapping is done. Traditionally, this lasts 16 bars. By the way, a bar is this number up here in your playlist. So you have the verse section, you also have the hook section where you'll also have an increase in the energy of the beat. Traditionally, this lasts around 8 bars. You have the intro and the outro, pretty self-explanatory here. My advice is that you don't make these too long, so we'll keep these at 2 to 4 bars. And then you have the bridge, which you can think of as a quick switch up from the rest of your beat, which lasts less than your verse or hook should. All of these are rough guidelines, and once again, feel free to experiment. There are plenty of beats that don't have intros or bridges or even hooks at times. It's just completely up to you what you want to do. But before you start building horizontally, it can help to at least come up with a rough plan for your sections. So for this beat, let's open up our playlist and start mapping out where these different sections of our beat will go using time markers. Now I want to point out, literally mapping your beat out like this by no means is mandatory. Using time markers is just an organization tool that you can use if you want, but you can do this mentally instead, which is usually what I do. Either way, it's just good to have some plan or idea of what you're going to be doing going into the horizontal beat making phase. So with this beat, using these markers, I have my beat mapped out. My plan is to go from a 4-bar intro into a standard 16-bar verse, then into an 8-bar hook. After this, we have a short 2-bar bridge, a standard 16-bar verse, 8-bar hook again, and then a short outro. Very simple structure here. And again, if you're following along and you're making this beat with me, don't feel like you have to create these time markers if you don't want to. But now that we've mapped out our beat, we can cross this off our list. Now let's start building. We'll start with our intro. Intros typically have less going on in them, and that's exactly what we'll do here. We can start with an idea like this. Then this will go into our full loop with all of our blocks playing for 16 bars. You'll often notice that transitioning from one section to another might sound a bit rough in your beats. Transition sounds can help with this. For example, the most common one is a reverse crash like this. Going from one section to the next sounds a bit better. From here, we will go from our verse into our hook. Like I mentioned, the hook is typically where you want the energy level of your beat to go up, and one way that you can do this is by adding more sounds. So here, I'm going to create a new block for this hook section by pressing this button up here, and I'll call this the hook block. Then I will place it during the hook. Now let's find a sound to add into the beat. For this block, I will use a stock plugin that comes with FL Studio called Flex. Here I have selected the preset Fairy Sparkle to build this pattern. And now that I have my preset selected, let's build a pattern with it. First, let's make sure to move the cursor over the hook section, and then I will open the piano roll for this new sound. And now I will try to build a pattern that works with everything else that I've built in my beat so far. Let's try and pitch this down. Let's also try extending all these notes. Now, while I like this, I can tell there's a lot of clashing with other sounds in this beat that I should fix. So let's go ahead and send this to the mixer insert like all of our other sounds. And from the sounds of it, it seems like there are frequency issues happening. So I'll add my EQ and then I will cut out the frequencies that are clashing and sounding ugly. That sounds much better. Now this new block fits in perfectly for my hook. Fantastic news. But adding more sounds into your beat isn't the only idea that you can use. You can also try just adding more to the blocks that you already have. For example, I'm going to take my guitar pattern and I will use the make unique option on it. This creates an alternate version of the same pattern that I can make changes to without affecting my original pattern. So from here, I will double click to go into this unique pattern and I will add a couple more notes to this block. And now I will take this unique new pattern for my hook. I will duplicate it for the entirety of the hook and take a listen to how my brand new hook section now sounds. Great, it sounds like the energy level definitely does pick up for the hook section of this beat. From here, what I have mapped out next is the bridge, so let's experiment with the blocks that I currently have in my beat and see if I can use some of them to build a bridge. I'm going to duplicate a few of these blocks, my mallet, my bass, and my hook sound. And I will also make these unique because I plan on creating different patterns for my bridge using these exact same blocks. And here, I will just come up with something different. Here's what the mallet pattern was before, and here's what it is now. And here is what the hook sound pattern was before, and here is the after for this bridge. And I ended up leaving the bass pattern alone, so here is what we have for our bridge now. From here, we have mapped out that we go back into the verse and then into the hook. So I'll just go ahead and copy and paste the verse and the hook sections that I've already built and use them again. I will place this right after the bridge. Then from here, I'll just create a short little outro where I have just a few of the sounds from my beat playing one last single note, and that's it. So with this two-part process, you can make full, complete beats yourself by going through these steps one by one. Now at this point, if you are looking for more in-depth beat making help where I go even far more into detail, I do want to mention that I have a course, Better Beatmaker, that you can check out. You can learn more about it by clicking next to me here. But if you want to continue learning on your own, I have plenty of free beat making videos on my channel as well. My recommendation is my Beat Making Over Explained series. Many people say they've learned the most from those videos of mine. Either way, I hope this video has helped you. And if it has, like and subscribe. And that's pretty much it. Bye for now.